as well. Okay. First speaker up, the floor is yours.
Hi everyone, just checking. Am I audible and visible?
Audible and visible.
Before I start, POI is just to unmute, and I'm sorry if I'm talking about some sensitive topic. It's just for the sake of the debate. Starting my speech in three, two, one. Our side of the house today, oppositions are protecting the most important actor in this debate, which is the LGBTQIA plus movement, not the company. That's why we win this debate. 2 points of characterization I want to posit to you, Judge. One, what does this increasing of commercialization of queer spaces actually look like? It looked like sponsoring pride events, rainbow marketing campaigns, and etc. Is as what it stated in the motion. This means the actors, and etc. This means actually the actors that are going to like give money. For example, the company will gain power by sponsoring pride events, for example, and etc. These actors will gain power by controlling. They are giving money, meaning they have power. What I'm trying to highlight is that it's not within the interest of the main actor of this debate when it comes to social movement and especially the LGBTQI plus movement. They want awareness and knowledge, not solely just money. On government side of the house, their world look like the oppressor, which is the company, keep on oppressing the people, which is the movement. That's what will happen on government side of the house. Exploitation will happen because in terms of money, when these companies finally give them money, it seems like they have power to like suppress the actor. They have power to control the other. This is what SQ proved to you. But then secondly, I would like to characterize the movement itself, which is the LGBTQI plus movement. Their main goal is to have some sort of integrity and dignity. Their interest is to create safe places for those vulnerable actors and also create some freedom of expression. This is what definition I agreed from said government. On our world, commercialization still exists, but it's not increased because we give you alternative, i.e., bazaar, donation, etc., etc. If it is that urgent to like gain money to create some event or like parade, and etc. Then we believe it's not that urgent to like let the movement being sponsored or like touched with this company if there is a lot of alternative you can get money. But then yeah, uh, one argument on my speech then why it is not within the movement of the interest, and also this argument will contain a bunch of rebuttal towards sites government. Three layers of analysis. One, on social movement, LGBTQI plus movement, main interest is to create safe places and give or like support the freedom of expression for those vulnerable actors. What they actually need is knowledge and also awareness of society. This is our stance from the very beginning of the debate, Judge. What does this create then? This create respect within the society. This is much more important to create knowledge and also awareness because it will create respect within the society. Note that money simply will not solve this problem, will not solve the problem within the society, which is the lack of awareness towards those vulnerable actors. And we believe on our side of the house, we create this respect simply by maintaining the knowledge and awareness will still happen on our side of the house. And secondly, how is this better than judge? What I'm trying to prove to you, Judge, is the fact that money and economy help is not that urgent for this movement to begin with. Because remember of their interest before. The example is quite simple. Most of the time, opening, for example, opening bars, gay bars, rainbow parades, marketing, and etc. etc. Oftentimes, this some sort of event doesn't need that much money. They are still donation. You can also like do a race fund bazaar or etc. in a much more creative way instead of just receive sponsors. Thirdly, this proves to you, judge, if your goal is to like gain economy benefits, it's just lose on one metric, which is the urgency. If government were there to say like, hey, but with money we can give more rainbow flags on like the cheeks or rainbow shoes and etc. etc. Notice, judge, this idea that created from money doesn't even shift the society to become more aware towards the movement itself. I do agree that the representation of like flags, rainbow flags are there, but then it happens in small scale and also only happen on a very short term time. For example, in the Pride Month, and the moment it ends, everyone already like yeah, forget about it. And yeah, so if we both agree that the goal for the social movement is like to create safe places and at the same time be or gain that representation is not happening on said government. More important analysis I'm trying to posit to you, Judge, is on the reasoning behind why, even if economy is that urgent to like gain money to be represented, because yeah, I don't see the like logical chain between that. But yeah, let's be charitable. Why it will still provide negative impacts at the end of the day, right? Government asks, should the movement reject like the resources from big company? Their side says no, because it will make the movement A, attract society, B, advocate for more, and C, they can create more places with that resources from big company. This is untrue, and there's several reasoning, right? One, it's not within the interest again and again of the movement to like gain money easily, to gain easy money from big company. But even if it is because of the urgency government trying to pass it to you, it will create more even harmful effect, because companies incentive is of course like gain money, also gain profit, also gain benefits from that. They won't simply give you money without getting another like return, right? This means they will more likely to support movement, not because they are that genuine, but because they want people to like recognize them as actor that is kind, the superhero, the important, and etc. etc. But then the reasoning why the companies is like not going to be that genuine to like give you money already proved to you, judge, it will not bring any some sort of sustainability towards the movement. And yeah, under all this reason, I'm so proud standing in proposition. Thank you.
Thank you. First up, to continue, I call the first speaker of side government.
Am I audible and visible?
Audible and visible.
Okay, because I'm going to talk about certain community, and I believe that this is quite a sensitive topic. So just a quick disclaimer, I'm going to be equitable as much as possible. I hope that I don't offend anyone here. Starting my PI is highly encouraged. My speech in 3, 2, 1. As the LGBTQ plus IA movement, we think that the importance of us trying to be acknowledged from other people is going to be there whenever we try to impose the importance of ourselves being acknowledged, like the reason why our identity is also being dismissed. The reason why people often associate us with just label is because people often forget that we exist as a whole, like we exist as a movement, we exist as a group, that this is not just about an individual identifying themselves with certain sexuality, but also because we have someone who supports us. That's the reason why, let's say that even if it's corporations, we believe that is still good at the end of the day. But onto the rebuttals here, that this probably will create a systemic oppression within the minority groups, which is the LGBTQ plus movement in a sense. We think firstly, simply no. We think that the way this collaboration would happen within the existence of this queer people, let's say that even if they only got to represent one people, for example, it's still okay. Because if they were to be that very ignorant and they could just make a whole new campaign without them even discussing this idea or this scenario to queer people themselves, queer people will condemn them. That's the reason why we have cancel culture over corporations. That's the reason why queer people will boycott over things, right? Even if let's say that the impact is not big because the majority will not care, let's say that these queer people will have this strong belief that they need to go against corporations. That's why corporations will try to champion their market. That's why they want to care about these queer people. But also second, onto the even if, let's say that even if this is a systemic oppression, that they would just give fundings and they would neglect us for the rest of the day. This is still important to be conducted. At the end, when you have a parade, these people who chimes in are the ones who are really in desperate need to find their community. Even if Pride Month is over, no one bats an eye again. This feeling of them feeling that they are hopeful, other people are like them as well, is the thing that we need to discuss over in this debate. So therefore, the extension here on why then there's penetration of queer movement in layers of society and why it's going to be very beneficial for them themselves. But also first analyzes that within the existence of this commercialized queer movement, people would welcome more and people would become more and more exposed to their identity attached to the promotion from these pieces. That they know queer people exist, that the spot to this venue is reserved to those who have the same beliefs, have believe that they are within the queer community, so that they are being acknowledged as a group. Because capitalism needs to prove that their legit marketing tactic are having a specific people to target. That's the reason why also, for example, MAGA was campaign for a presidency, for example, they start creating merch, they start to conduct meeting, people acknowledge them, they could identify them, and etc. That would happen with queer people. Let's say that despite conservative hates queer, the reason why queer people will now be acknowledged is because they would campaign as much as possible. It's because they have spaces now. It's because you have queer clubs now. If you hadn't have queer clubs in a sense, people wouldn't know that queer people even go out clubbing because they think that we are just stuck in like a cubicle or something. That's the reason why we need to acknowledge the existence of ourselves, even with society trying to hate us and etc. Because the important things is that we are acknowledged. But the second analysis then on why this is important, we think individuals are often dismissed when they associate themselves with a name society is unfamiliar with. This is shown when native says that, oh, I am an Indian. They are a part of a culture. They are a public just states that you are just an American. You are nothing special. You need to tell people that. This is harmful since our identity is tied with how we carry our pride within it. That's why the reason why self-doubt and confusion will arise if people continue to dismiss you, and that's the reason why we had to do this. But also second analysis, this is why queer on the advertisement is emphasized, that this even is open to those who identify themselves, or even open to them to those who want to get more introduced with LGBTQ plus movement. That's the reason why they want to try and protect these queer people in a sense that they don't want any intruders coming onto this. And I will tell you why the capital will have exactly the benefit for this on my second extension. But before that, when increase the repetition, the same prompt of love is love, public cannot just say that this is false because it's spread everywhere, because you see Unilever with their rainbow flag campaigns literally on the street. That's the reason why they cannot condemn this corporations in a sense. Let's say that the scalability C is better, it's bigger than the alternatives that opposition might provide, that even if this is not important because you don't need others' approval, we think this is going to be even better for these corporations themselves to actually acknowledge these people. Because let's put other people aside, right? Corporations have long dismissed the DEI even because they don't see it as profitable for them. When they got the benefit of, the government itself trying to impose for the DEI before Trump gets into power, they see that as a way that, oh, I could probably champion on these people hard, so therefore people would buy from my company even more because I don't want my stocks to go down. That's the reason why they want to do the same with queer people as well. So therefore the weighing here is simple. When you are battling with the idea of sexuality, when your gender are dismissed, when you have body dysmorphia, the only thing that you need is acknowledgement, and you would only get that when your existence is legitimized. But also second analysis, see that these corporations already have the connotation that they could do anything they want. This allows room for normalization. Like this is the reason why when corporations change their logo, no one even care, because at the end of the day, people wouldn't hate on corporations because they could still generate profit anyway. What would happen then is people people who already support this queer movement in itself would, try to champion this rainbow flags that corporations have done. So that's the reason why people would still have pride, even if, let's say, it's tokenistic, because at the end of the day, you are the one who feeling that people cannot even dismiss you because corporations now are the actor that is very huge. You cannot try to tackle it down. But also see that this means that people would have even a bigger queer spaces like parade that usually are trying to raise donations, usually are having philanthropists that are very charitable, in a sense that they are also a part of elites, but they want to try and wash themselves. We say that this increasement will try to champion their heart, and therefore they could care more about how this this queer existence in public is fairly important for them to do. But also, second extension and quick in this, the queer community have bigger bargaining power with the corporation. Yes, to an extent, this corporation would have the control towards the queer movement. Probably people will frame queer movement as someone that is very capitalistic. They are minority. We need to focus on this. Yes, we do believe that it's true. But what happened, panels, is when you try to associate yourself with corporations, like what those environmental activists trying to do, because we're talking about social movement here, is that these people are going to some extent collaborating with this collaborating with any social movement and try to make the government allows them to do anything. This is the reason why when we are talking about capital, we won't just stop there. This is the reason why I said the relation is also important. The fact that people would over the world would gather and see how this parade has been done by Unilever or any other corporations that is very huge. They want to see if that queer people have managed to talk over certain things that these queer people would feel comfortable with this corporation, so therefore it could be done fairly and also could be done beautifully, for example. This is the reason why onto the weighing that the respect and knowledge would still be gained, because at the end of the day, queer people would conduct this, so therefore very proud to propose.
Thank you, second prop. For the fine speech, to continue, I call the second speaker of opposition.
Am I audible?
Audible.
Okay. Yeah, disclaimer, I don't think my speech will be of equity, but if there are any, this speech is only for debate purposes only. Your eyes on mute yourself. I heavily encourage any go. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Anything that proposition gives you, awareness, grand events for expression, is not exclusive to corporate funding to even begin with, nor is a grand event the most urgent thing for your movement, right? Several responses for proposition before going into my extension. Firstly, whenever they told you that, and they take the trade-off that autoconistic is okay because our movement meets the capacity, we need the money to be even begin with. Firstly, I think there is no urgency towards this because we do believe that donations, it's not that expensive to go outside with a cardboard sign or whatever, right? Pride parades and events are general have a very low entry barrier. All we ask for you as a social movement is for you to be able to express yourself with your full pride and to not be like, stuck in your own bubble and etc. Right? It's very accessible for you to simply participate in this type of events without there being like a huge brand like Coca-Cola, Sprite, or whatever that is like sponsoring the event and etc. But secondly, even if it is beneficial towards the event, this is an actor motion, right? Meaning that as the queer movement, your meaning and purpose is to embody the goal of full integration and acceptance of queer people into society in the very first place. That's your whole like mission here as a movement. Then I think then the analogy is very simple. It's like if a vegan community took a sponsor from a sausage company, because it doesn't make any sense, right? The reason why I make this comparative is because these companies often still exploit their workers, lobby politicians who are homophobic, and etc. and etc. The list goes on. All of which conflicts and is a direct conflict of interest towards the LGBTQ movement in the very first place, right? Meaning that no, you cannot take the trade-off that tokenistic is going to be okay, because still, as an actor motion, one of the main things you should be like thinking about is exactly the interest of your movement, is exactly about who you're taking the money from in the very first place. It doesn't really matter if it is money, if the money was made from the like labor of people in the very first place, right? But secondly, see, whenever they said that, oh, we need legitimacy and we need people to know that our movement exists, I think that firstly, I don't understand why this legitimacy is very exclusive to the fact that if we have like these big corporate people like sponsoring us, then the legitimacy will be there, right? Because your members are your direct legitimacy. Queer media is still something that is very popular. The world is getting more progressive. There are many like queer celebrities out there, and etc. and etc. You already have the legitimacy, and you don't need to fight for it. No one thinks that the community is invisible. If I ask some random stranger in the middle of the street, they will know what the queer community is, right? You don't need help from companies outside your community because your members already voiced it out for you. Especially if we want to like look back here and actually step back to read the motion, right? I think then this type of motion will only apply towards like the already liberal and already like quite progressive countries to even begin with, right? Because of course, whenever we're talking about already conservative countries like Indonesia, for example, they're not going to have this type of things because we aren't in that stage of liberalness in the very first place. So we're talking about countries like the USA, most of Europe in general, all of which already have a pretty good acceptance towards this type of things in the very first place. And we tell you, you don't need that extra funding, right? But extension, actually engaging that, yeah, even if they are liberal, then they still have a very long way to go, right? Why the rise of the commercialization redirects the main point of the movement in the very first place? What's the premise here? I think that we need to ask ourselves, what does the queer movement actually want? I think two things. Firstly, you want social change so that their members can actually be accepted by the community and not be discriminated at all. But also, we want policy change that actually change the systemic oppression that actually works against the LGBTQ community. Like, for example, legalizing gay marriage, lesbian marriage, and etc. The list goes on. All of this is above the economic interest of the community, right? This is something I can say because exactly they are a social movement. They are social. What that means is that their main priority is not to get funding, but to create a social change so that they can be accepted by society. Because the main problem, the main issue that the social movement is trying to tackle is not on whether or not their members are poor or in poverty and etc. is the fact that their members are not accepted. Here's when this extension becomes a complete flip to proposition kids. Even if proposition wants to say that the quantity of the queer spaces will be increased, or we want larger capacity to create these big events and etc. Here's the thing. Exactly when you allow queer movements to host these grand events, the public becomes tricked to think that the queer community is not marginalized community in the very first place. This is engaging even in our worst case scenario, right? Why is this likely? I think that firstly, the fact that you host these big parades all around town is a physical reminder that like, hey, this type of community is very dominant, right? But secondly, it makes it seem as if they have these like big companies backing them up, when in reality, no. Most of this commercialization only happens during a specific time. It's usually Pride Month, and the second June ends, all the flags and all of these like merchandise and etc. are immediately taken down in the very first place. That is the manifestation of the rise that we're actually seeing in the status quo. It's the fact that these companies are not actually genuine enough to still be able to like continue promoting this even after Pride Month has ended, right? The problem I have with this is that people who aren't allies or queer don't go out of their way to notice this pattern. They don't notice that these companies are truly that tokenistic in the very first place, because unless you are in the community or unless you are someone who's an avid like a debater or whatever, then you're probably not going to be noticed. Like the average person wouldn't know. What happens is exactly what we see in the status quo, where people complain that queer people already have a whole month dedicated towards them, or why like they already have so many sponsors. What more could they want, and etc. All of those quotes that a lot of people use to try to invalidate the systemic oppression that queer people still see. Even in the USA, even in countries that we label as progressive, they still have a long way to go, right? This is harmful because what the movement wants is social change. So when people don't actually think that they are struggling, what happens is that there's significantly less pressure for the government to make a systemic change in the very first place. The impact then is simple.
Yeah,
Yeah. Go ahead.
Then why would the government care if this community were really struggling? I don't think that the government would bat an eye from the very beginning.
Here's the thing then. The main point of my extension is exactly because it makes it seem like the whole community is doing okay, when in reality, the government is not actually doing any type of systemic change for them in the very first place. That's the illusion that proposition is trying to feed towards the politicians that are in power. Okay, I think then aid is only conditional towards Pride Month, trends, and etc. Anything outside of that is just out of the picture in Proposition House. This makes the movement largely stagnant because sure, it may look like it may look good from outside, but the people sitting in the Oval Office can still sit still while making queer marriage illegal, or like just a lack of effort to make like sex education actually accessible in at school education and etc. Right? All of which is actually vital if the queer community actually wants to be properly accepted into society in the very first place. The problem is this: whenever you make the queer community seem like they're doing just fine, what happens is that people actually don't actually have any pressure towards the people that are sitting at the top of the chain in the very first place. The comparative is simple. Sure, we take the trade-off that the capital will be less because we will be contingent on individual donators. But one, status quo is already progressive. You don't have the urgency to market rainbows intensively and etc. Even if there is a marketing, we tell you that it's literally just a logo. It's not really that fulfilling towards the depth and the true meaning of the community. But secondly, we don't need to create such grand events anyways. What matters most is the expression and the freedom to do that expression in the very first place. It doesn't matter if it's not grand. It doesn't matter if it's not like a big parade. What matters most is the community and also the members in the queer community in the very first place. Those are the people that we want to protect. For those reasons, very proud to be standing on up.
Yep, thank you. Second up, to continue, I call third speaker of prop.
Hi, am I audible and visible?
Yes, audible and visible.
PLI to unmute. Yeah. Oh, wait. This just for debate. I'll talk about some minority people. It's just for the sake for debate. So, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. We think that the LGBTQ plus people or community in the current status quo right now was very hard to acceptable by people. Exactly because this intervention coming from corporation, it can help them to get recognition from people. That's why I'm very proud to propose this motion. Before going to my clashes and why we still can win this debate, I think the opposition cannot win this debate simply because they are framing this minority, these people as people, this LGBTQ community as people that are very vulnerable. But we will argue that because of this intervention that coming from corporation, we think that we can uplift their name and community to the people. But under the rebuttal, they say that this corporation can control and can pressure this LGBTQ plus people. I have two responses. First, simply no, we think that the companies still have integrity and image. There is a digital track. That's why they won't have incentive to control the LGBTQ people, or like they are disadvantaged these people. There is to say there is still check and balance that coming from people, or like there's cancel culture that already being said coming from my previous speaker. But second, even if this is still happen, let's say that these people still control this corporation still control the LGBTQ plus people. We think that in our side of the house, this is still aligned with the interest of the LGBT community itself, because we are collaborate with this corporation. We confront the reality by accepting the elite because we are positioning ourselves to even have bigger power and bargaining power. And I'll talk about bargaining power later in my comparison. I think that there's two things I think that there's two things I want to bring in this speeches. First, about the resources and penetration of community. I think that in our side of the house, we believe that in the interest of LGBTQ plus people movement is to create progressivity and to create acceptance by people. But the problem is that social movement have limited resource energy, right? We are having limited resources and we are having limited capital. But also, I think that charity, what they want to suggest to you, the other alternative is that charity or like Bazaar, for example, so they are having their own capital. But the problem in here is that we will argue that this charity was not enough. Why is that so? I think the company have more capital, but not only company have more capital and money, but also they are having more position. For example, like Nestle. So when they are promoting rainbow flag, there will be more bargaining power because now LGBTQ plus people, because now LGBTQ plus movement having the position, having the bargaining power that coming from this Nestle in the industry, right? But even if they are because they are still minority, right? But at the end of the day, they still have the powerful lobbying with the government to talk about certain policy. Even if this is failed, I think that there's still attempt that coming from this LGBTQ plus people. But why this bargaining power was really important? Because I think that I think that the existence of this LGBTQ plus movement was brought at this point, right? But the problem is but the problem is in here is that there's a lot of conservative people who cannot even accept these people. So I think that when they are positioning themselves with this corporation, we think that there's more acceptance that coming from people, and I will explain to you why this is really important and likely. But I think that B, why in outside of the house, this is the only way, uh, uh, this is the only way to help this LGBTQ plus people because they talk about, oh, I think that the campaign of LGBTQ plus
Alright.
people is LGBTQ plus movement is not really that expensive, that we can just like go to road, that is it is not really that expensive. But I would like to, but I think that there's two things in here. First, I think that in outside of the house, the metrics in this debate is not about legitimacy, about the acceptance that coming from people. But I think that in outside of the house, we can win this debate in the part of scalability. Sure, this LGBTQ plus movement, these queer people exist in the status quo. But the problem in here is that the scale was really small. The positioning, I think that in outside the house we can get positioning even better because the positioning even better because this corporation who are involved themselves to help this LGBTQ plus movement. But B, I think that people have short-term incentive when they are coming to community because I think that without really backing up, people lost their interest to campaign in the community because when there's no capital, because when there's no backing up from this corporation, they will not having the willingness to even involve themselves and like contribute to this community because there's lack of support and there's lack of exposure. So I think that this intervene from the company will persist the interest because they are provide the capital and they are making up the campaign from this LGBTQ plus people. But the way here is, I think that first, this is still aligned with the interest from the LGBTQ plus people because they are still can persist their ideology, yet they are having more bargaining power. But second, I think that even if this is not true, I think that we still win in the exclusivity because we are the one who provide to you the sustainability because we are persist the movement even more. And yeah, before that movie, I'll take the POI. Three.
Yeah, how can the community get bargaining power? Because companies won't lobby for you simply because they don't gain anything from that.
I think that the reason why because they are having the like certain conversation because they are having the certain conversation before they are collaboration, so there's like contract before they are collaborate. But second, even if this is not true, even if they cannot bargaining even if they cannot lobby with the government, it is still all right because they still like having the representation. Because my previous speaker already told you that even if the representative only came in from one person, we think that this is make more progressivity rather than they just doing nothing. But regarding the representation, this is the second thing I want to tell you in this debate. Representation of community. They talk about when this is being commercialized, people will not look them as marginalized. So there's no people that will look at them. But our side of the house suggests that first, I think that to respond this, like why we have to make these people very vulnerable at the very first place, right? When we are because when this LGBTQ community already collaborate with this with this corporation, there'll be more bigger recognition. So I think that they will look at this community, they will look this LGBTQ plus movement as a part of community, not only as a minority or vulnerable people. And I think that when people still look at them as a vulnerable, we think that they are being seen as people who are not they cannot, like, they're not being seen as people who are help. They are not being seen as community itself. They are not being seen as people who can be helped by other people, right? But second, I think that because this is being promoted by big capital, because there are more recognition by people. Even if, let's say, that people not accept these people, at least that we shift the discourse that coming from people. We have eye from people to talk about this at the very first place. The way in here is simple. I think that the recognition will be more bigger in outside the house, and I think that this is also exclusive. That's why very proud.
Okay, thank you so much, third Goff. To continue, I call the third speaker of opposition.
Hi, just checking if I'm audible and visible.
Audible and visible.
For any of you, please just unmute yourself. All right, since this is talking about the LGBTQIA community, I do apologize if I may be talking about something sensitive. I'll try to avoid so though. 3, 2, 1. Third speaker was right that, hey, these vulnerable people still need these types of communities. But at the same time, they're saying, as long as we provide these types of communities just some level of attention, it's already enough. We tell you no. Two clashes we're going to bring here. Firstly, on the principle. Secondly, on the practical. Quite simple, right? Firstly, on principle, then. We tell you that using the movement as a means to an end, regardless of whatever actor actually has from this, is, for example, to only obtain profit, is never justified for any purpose. The reasoning for this is simple. It's because, well, firstly, it's comprised of movements that are with vulnerable communities that are historically oppressed, for example. You should not use those specific identities. So, for example, use them as a way to make money. But the second reasoning for this is because it comprises of individuals with different levels of self-expression. Even if you do prove that somehow you do get a lot more expression, allow for more people to actually express themselves, the initial intention in itself already outweighs all of the benefits. This means the harm is not good enough. But here's an intuition prompt if you don't get what I mean. Let's say a stranger uses your name and face and post it on a package of potato chips, for example, because you are famous. But at the same time, they try to promote it because, well, by using other strangers, by using their name, by their labor, a very hard work ethic, for example, and force them to work in order for them to get money, for instance. This is horrible for multiple reasons. For one, it's just the case that you did not consent to this in the very slightest. Notice that there was never an initial contract of which Coca-Cola signed with the LGBTQIA community in order to get this type of sponsorship, for example. They just randomly showed up over there. But secondly, it's just using your name not to serve you, but themselves, when you are already at their very low point, exactly as proposition tries to portray, and then there's just trying to make money off of it. I feel like in just a basic intuition, it's not a good thing. But okay, let's try to be more charitable. The only way for them then to actually like prove that this is still justified is by proving that this is something so urgent. But why did we actually prove this is not true necessarily? 2 points here. One, on funding. They tell you that, funding is not enough under our side of the house. We tell you, firstly, that, hey, things like GoFundMe, putting your food at the bazaar, for example, is still quite crucially good enough. And you don't need to ask for anything in exchange. They secondly didn't really tell you why it's so important to have such a large form of movement, when in fact, just having a small community and still having that self-expression is still preserved under our side of the house. But thirdly, there's one benefit that they cannot claim that exists under our side of the house. It's because of things like GoFundMe or just getting donations from people later community is still something that's such a good thing anyway. Why? Because even if you are caught cash strapped, the collective effort to try to make change is still far more meaningful for you, for example, right? As a community, because you have other people that are homogenous around you to actually want to try to help you in the very first place. But secondly, we've already took so much of a trade-off just by saying, hey, this just all proves to you that it's not important enough to have that large amount of a funding anyways. I'll take that POA right now.
But if you're that very level on vulnerability, like for example, your prop told you, oh, we need to, get more funding and etc., then why would they wouldn't suffer with the small amount of donation that they got?
I don't really get what you mean. If you're trying to talk about, I have very small donation, then you kind of just do what you can with that. But aside from that, it's just the case that I don't see the urgency behind it because it doesn't necessarily mean you need funding to necessarily do these types of programs. This brings me nicely to my second point on social discussion and the ability to self-expression. They necessarily have to pinpoint how expression is contingent on the fact that you have money. Meanwhile, in reality, there's multiple ways to actually self-express yourself. We tell you what, just telling your friends about how you're gay, for instance, or just talking to a lot more things. But secondly, social media within current society is so simple anyways, right? You have Instagram, you can go on your phone. This just tells you that in-depth knowledge can still be obtained under our side of the house. Social media discussion is something so highly accessible anyways. But also secondly, I would tell you that discussion is not very high when they try to put it upon these types of companies. The reasoning for this is simple. It's because while companies have the profit incentive, the most likelihood that they would like to try to promote LGBTQIA is by putting a stamp on some Coca-Cola bottle, for example. It's highly unlikely that they would want to make donations towards these vulnerable communities by building some schools, for example, exactly because one, they may lack some capacity, or two, they just don't really see any benefit to it. But secondly, it's just the fact that we're debating this in a world that is far more progressive. That is just to tell you that it's still likely that there's change under our side of the house. This serves to tell you within this clash that all they have stated is crucially just not important. Secondly, a second clash on pragmatism, we would tell you that there's horrible negative impacts to the movement, even if we were to take them at their best case. What did we tell you to this? Firstly, they try to say, there's a lot of sense of expression. Firstly, you cannot really reach a lot of people. Like, why do companies suddenly want to sponsor a large amount of people anyways? Secondly, why is it urgent? We already proved to you this. But thirdly, we flipped this by saying, hey, if you were to go to a pride parade and somehow it just feels all the way vague. Why? Because Coca-Cola has their logo on your most important flag for your identity. But fourthly, this is a second flip. A lot of vulnerable communities just feel crucially uncomfortable because the background of these companies are the ones that are quote writing on the good name of your social movement. Meanwhile, their background is like, for example, what? They try to give you the example of Nestle, the literal company that profited off of child labor, for instance, that was forced upon them. But secondly, they never prove to you how you actually have large enough of a social change. Their mechanization is that, we have something so big, therefore we actually shift discourse, for example. The first thing to say to this is that if they're trying to impact these conservative people that are so opposed to these types of to LGBTQ communities, I don't think it's actually going to change anything. The homophobics are going to remain homophobic exactly because it is so integral to their identity. For example, if you were to think this is sorry to say this, by the way. For example, when Prabowo tried to implement the idea that LGBTQ is a national threat, the bounty hunter suddenly appeared because it's integral towards their religion, for instance. This just proves to you that their delta of change is at best vague. But even if we were to take their best case scenario, the next extension crucially becomes the tipping point. Because exactly when the companies already provide a lot of movements for them, politicians have no incentive to actually provide political change. Two reasons we provided to you here. One, because they don't want to be seen as lobbying, exactly because they're supported by these types of companies in the very first place. That's why they're not willing to be seen as a company, a politician that is being lobbied. But secondly, exactly because they're already being supported, they don't see an urgency to try to be supporting others because they fear backlash from the general majority that you're trying to waste money on a community that is perfectly fine. This is important because one, even though they have normative change under their side of the house, it doesn't substitute political change. This looks like schools that are exclusively for LGBTQ communities, queer marriage, work quotas, and transgender clinics. All of this this outweighs anything proposition says, because even if you have social discussion, I believe the necessity behind all of these other factors, these other policies that people need to integrate within society outweighs all of that. All of those reasons, I beg you,
Thank you. Third up, we're just going to jump into the reply. So I welcome the reply speaker of opposition.
Hi everyone, am I audible?
Audible, yes.
Thank you. Wait. I'll be starting my reply speech in 3, 2, 1. Opposition side of the house cannot win this debate just by saying that, hey, we need money to create grand parades because that is the only way for us to like gain acknowledgement, right? When precisely all of us three speakers from side opposition today, we have told you actually small parades can operate and still give some sort of magnitude into the society. But even if you don't buy that, even if you do think that grand parades is the only way to like gain some sort of acknowledgement in the society, we already told you that donation and fundraising already exist in the current society, right? If resources are that promising and are able to like fulfill the movement interest, I think yeah, said government can win. But throughout the debate, I only see that side proposition saying, hey, we urgently need the money, and at the same time we told you the harm that will occur. We win this debate because we give you clear process analysis as to why it's not aligned with our main actor in this debate, right? Two biggest mistakes that have been made by side proposition today. One, all of government ideas are based in the assumption that this debate only happens in the country that are boldly conservative. If I ask you guys to like buy the framing that we are living in a current very progressive society, that their ideas simply crumble down, right? We win. But then secondly, they are focusing on the wrong actor, which is the company. But then yeah, let's be charitable and moving on to like two clashes in this debate. First clash is on which side actually is aligned with the movement's interest. What have we proven to you, right? We've proven to you when the interest is to gain representation, to create safe places. We believe that receiving sponsors from a big company is not the logical chain where you can actually get some sort of acknowledgement. But then we also told you it is already accessible for this movement to show up in society with a small, like very simple parades. But we say even not with that grand parade, society can still acknowledge them. Precisely because they create parades from the nation or bazaar, they will gain more empathy from the society, not by having rainbow on Coca-Cola, for example, will do. But what did we get in response, right? They told you that with money, you can make good fancy parades, big parades, people will notice your movement, meaning your movement, your people will be noticed, and etc etc. They frame as if the society doesn't even know that queer people do exist in this whole planet earth. The reality is social media exists. We're living in a progressive society, so I don't think it happened. I boldly encourage government side of the house to be like more charitable and understand the current status quo. But then second question here, let's talk about Nestle, or I mean the company. They give example about Nestle, right? They told you that hey, they have capital, it will create bargaining power and yada yada. We told you company is profit oriented, profit driven. They are exploitative in the current status quo. This is what government side of the house need to like accept. If attracting society by putting rainbow flags on Coca-Cola bottle can gain profit, can gain attention, companies will use that in a more massive and can be harmful anyways. Let's call their example, for example, Nestle, who gain money by child labor, child exploiting. Does the social movement want to like be supported by this big company? Obviously, no. They also talk about like bargaining power. this is the best case from trying to present to you, which is collaboration. But our previous speaker have responded to all of this by cutting all of the urgency. Also, we told you, even if analysis on the why exactly, if collaboration happen, the harm will still occur. And the way here is simple, judge. We win on the principle, which is the base for the social movement to be able to actually gain supporters, and that is why we're opposition win today. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll reply. To conclude the debate overall, I welcome the government reply.
Am I audible and visible?
Audible and visible.
Okay. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. The moment that opposition whip did not respond to my POI correctly is the moment they lose. Because don't let the hate on capitalism blind you on the upside. Panels, there are 2 reasoning on why we win on top of opposition. Firstly, on the value of LGBTQ+ movement as a social movement. In opposition, they told you that, they need to look vulnerable to be recognized as a struggle. They need to be legitimized, that corporations are tokenistic anyway. They posit that government will only pay attention the moment it becomes very, struggling. But also what opposition proves to you is that the response with government corporations that can actually finalize the idea of LGBTQ+ movement as a whole, because they can, conduct rally, for example, that it starts with recognition, that it would be a grant, that the scale is going to be huge, but also the fact that, it's going to be start with gatherings, for example, the fact that, they have that much of a capital to even lobby the government. This is why 2 things in here. Firstly, let's say that proposition idea of vulnerability becomes the prerequisite of change. Then if that means they have to be so weak, government had to care, I question why wouldn't they suffer? Because in the first place, the small donations that they posit to you is enough, is not going to be there onto the queer spaces that they've told you, right? Because the second analysis here, because flip this likelihood of struggle connoted from opposition and prop was only when pride's over, money is over. But I believe that this is way better than not having anything in your plate, because they still receive more money in the process. They can still get there. Let's say that, it's only a 1 month only. Well, 1 month can grant you $1 million in the process, then I would be very thankful of that. And they receive way more than that. I think the characterization of relation and also the acquirement of bigger mass is already there on side proposition when they told you that, probably they have the relation. Let's say that even if I'd be very charitable here, that this is going to be in developed countries, probably. But I will say that the lobbying becomes more emphasized right now because developed country probably is profit-driven incentive anyway, so therefore they would care about this corporation and what they want. The rights would be even more legitimized. Therefore, see, the way here is simple. In conclusion, corporations would achieve this slightly better. So therefore, proposition is slightly better in terms of likelihood. But also the second analysis then, if you cannot get that as the tipping point, I believe that the community identity is even more emphasized on side proposition, because of 2 reasons here. Firstly, on community expression, I believe it's better than proposition because of, opposition engages in the idea of why then these corporations are really bad in the sense that they still conduct child labor, they still conduct discrimination, they still exclude people that are in the queer spaces. So therefore, I think that the push of idea about how queer people is already engaged in a sense that they still want to protect themselves because of the huge reputation that they got, the stock market and all of that stuff is also even affected by the scenario of how public approval is going to go up and down. Therefore, it is very important for us to note that this is not only a slight likelihood, but also onto the second thing. I think the homophobes are going to be homophobes anyway. We say that this is the same thing, that this in both sides are no longer the tipping point of the debate because we already proved this is not important. What we need to prove is how then queer community is going to feel as if they are more accepted into this idea of, groups. Why then this is why then this is likely? Because the identity that you would get is a sense of pride that at least you are being recognized, right? That at least corporations are not catering towards you because other people cannot just tackle down on the idea of why then corporations campaigns hallucinates a whole new group. I think that this whole idea of why then people would normalize this behavior of corporations trying to make campaigns over one group and jumping to another group at the same time proves the likelihood is better in terms of why then people would accept the idea of queer people living in the same area as them even better. So therefore very proud to propose.
Thank you so much, Gov Reply. So that marks the end of this round. So since this is a silent round, there will be no oral education. I think judges, we can move. Oh yeah, both teams can just take your rest now.